As we now approach week 6 of the 2024 college football season, there are 19 unbeaten teams left. A couple more ended up falling this past weekend, so now today we get to rank the last 19 unbeaten teams remaining, and all of them are hoping to make the college football playoff. While there's definitely no chance that they all stay undefeated, a lot of these teams are in for good seasons, and if you're still undefeated by this point in the year, you have to be pretty good. But before we get started with the video, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and rank all 19 unbeaten teams left. So at number 19 and then dead last, we have the Liberty Flames. I've been over it multiple times, but Liberty really hasn't done a whole lot. They've played one of the weakest schedules we've ever seen, as they beat Campbell 41-24 in week 1, New Mexico State by 6 points in week 2, and then these past 2 weekends, they beat UTEP 28-10, and most recently East Carolina 35-24. There really is no substance to Liberty's resume, but they still are unbeaten, and we'll have to wait because their game against App State was canceled, and they will play against Florida International here in a couple of days. At number 18, we have the Army Black Knights. What a year it has been for the military academies, as both Army and Navy are currently undefeated. They beat Lehigh 42-7 in week 1, before then beating FAU 24-7 in week 2. Their last 2 wins have come over both Rice and Temple, and Army being 4-0 is definitely pretty nuts. The military schools are never this good, and we'll get to find out here in a couple of days just how good Army is, as they'll go on the road to play against Tulsa, and this could be a tricky game in Oklahoma for them. For now though, good for Army. Up next we have Navy. Maybe Navy should be a little bit higher on the list, but honestly they still only have one good win. In week 1 they ended up beating Bucknell 49-21, before then beating Temple 38-11. In week 3, they got their premier win on their resume as they beat Memphis 56-44, as the Tigers were the contenders for one of the best group of 5 teams in the nation, and that was a big victory for them. Their most recent victory came on the road against UAB 41-18, and Navy now gets to play Air Force this upcoming week, and that could be a really fun one to watch out in Colorado. It is that time of the year as winning season is back, football is back, and MyBookie is here to make sure you are ready to cash in on all the action. This season, MyBookie is pulling out all the stops with incredible promotions like a weekly risk-free boost on Thursdays where you can bet without a sweat. If your bet hits, you win big. If it doesn't, forget it. MyBookie will refund your wager. But that's just the beginning. MyBookie is giving away hundreds of thousands in prizes with their Super Survivor and Square contests. Get your entries now in for your shot at huge cash rewards. When you're ready to get started, be sure to use my promo code FISHER50 and make sure to get some extra cash on top of your first deposit. Okay, but what do you get when you use my promo code? Well, if you type in Fisher50, you'll get up to $1,000 in a welcome bonus bet, plus a $10 casino chip. MyBookie's tiered bonuses make it easy to deposit with crypto or with credit, and the bigger your deposit, the bigger your bonus. The bonus would be 100% match up to $1,000 plus a $10 casino chip. With MyBookie, you can bet on anything, anywhere, at any time, and make your season a winning season. Be sure to check out my link down below and use my promo code FISHER50. That is FISHER50. After that, we have to talk about the James Madison Dukes. JMU has not missed a beat since they lost head coach Curt Cignetti over to Indiana, as the Dukes have continued where they left off. They beat Charlotte on the road 30-7 in week 1, before taking care of Gardner-Webb 13-6 in week 2. I'm not sure how you put up 13 points on Gardner-Webb, but managed to put 70 up on North Carolina a week later. I have no idea how that works, but yeah, that game against UNC was historic for JMU as they beat the Tar Heels 70-50 in what was one of the biggest barn burners we've ever seen. This past weekend, they beat Ball State 63-7, and it looks like James Madison is cruising. They have done a tremendous job adjusting to the FBS, and that game against Coastal Carolina coming up here in a couple weeks could be one of the most fun games we've seen in the Sun Belt in quite some time. Now we get to our first Power 5 team on the list, and that is the Duke Blue Devils. Currently, Duke is 5-0 under head coach Manny Diaz after they lost Mike Elko over to Texas A&M. Diaz has done a tremendous job with new quarterback Malik Murphy as they beat Elon 26-3 in week 1 before beating Northwestern in week 2 in overtime. That game was a thriller. In week 3, they came back and beat UConn and then went on the road and beat Middle Tennessee State 45-17. This past weekend, they got their second Power 5 victory as they beat their arch rival North Carolina 21-20, and that game was the thriller, and Duke is now 5-0. They're going to play against Georgia Tech here in a couple of days, and that will show us a lot. After that, they get Florida State, and if they beat Georgia Tech, there's a chance they're 7-0 playing against SMU, and that will be one of the more underrated games in the ACC this year. So right after Duke, we have the Ohio State Buckeyes. I know people complain each and every week about Ohio State's ranking, but beating Michigan State really doesn't move the needle that much. They still only have one Power 5 win, as that comes against a Spartans team that's not very good. In Week 1, they beat Akron 52-6, before in Week 2, they beat Western Michigan 56-0. Sandwiched between those games was a win against Marshall, and right now the Buckeyes are 4-0, and their offense looks great, and Jeremiah Smith is a star, but they finally get an opportunity for their first quality game against Iowa this upcoming weekend, as Iowa's defense will be very difficult, and they'll finally have an opportunity to start moving up, as they then get Oregon, Nebraska, and Penn State after that. Ranked right in front of the Ohio State Buckeyes is the Iowa State Cyclones. The Cyclones currently have 2 wins against Power 5 opponents, as after beating North Dakota in Week 1 21-3, they won the Cy-Hawk Trophy game 20-19 in Week 2. The Hawkeyes were ranked number 21 in the country, and Rocco Becht orchestrated a great second half comeback. In Week 3, they beat Arkansas State 52-7, and then this past week, they beat Houston 20-0. Yes, Houston is past Vanderbilt's level of bad, but it still is a road victory against a Power 5 team. Iowa State's currently ranked number 16, and they're definitely going under the radar. With games against Baylor and West Virginia coming up, we'll find out a lot more of what the Cyclones are really made of. Ranked in front of Iowa State, we have the number 25 team in the country, the UNLV Rebels. They're currently 4-0, and after a crazy situation this past week with their starting quarterback Matthew Sluka, some expected them to fall off. Well, they continue where their season has been going, as they beat Houston 27-7 in Week 1, Utah Tech 72-14 in Week 2, and then Kansas 23-20 in Week 3. While neither of those 2 wins are aging all that well, it's still huge to have 2 Power 5 road victories, and then this past week with Hajj Malik Williams, the new backup, they ended up hanging 59 points on Fresno State, and they're now 4-0 going into a game against Syracuse. This Syracuse game is going to be quite interesting this upcoming Friday, and they get this at home. UNLV has a real opportunity to be the best Group of 5 team, and they have a path to the playoff. A game against Boise State coming up in about a month is going to be absolutely insane, and good for Barry Odom for fixing the mess that was UNLV football. After UNLV, we have the Missouri Tigers. I know some people are going to think they're a little bit low, as I am a Mizzou homer, but it's about time they move down the list. After beating Murray State 51-0 in Week 1, they ended up shutting out Buffalo 38-0 in Week 2. After that, in Week 3, they beat number 24 Boston College 27-21, and while BC is currently 4-1, they have struggled their last 2 games to win, so I think they're a little bit worse than their record indicates. After that, it took a miracle for Mizzou to beat Vanderbilt, as they had to bank on Vandy missing a field goal. This past weekend they were on bye, and we'll find out right away how good Mizzou is and if they're going to be improved from their last 2 weeks, as they play number 25 Texas A&M on the road in College Station, and that game's going to be nuts. Ranked right in front of Mizzou is the Pitt Panthers. Pitt has enjoyed a 4-0 start under head coach Pat Narduzzi, and they have figured things out rather quickly. After beating Kent State 55-24 in Week 1, they then had 2 impressive victories back-to-back, as they went on the road and beat Cincinnati in a fourth quarter comeback 28-27, and then knocked off their arch-rival West Virginia 38-34 in a game in Morgantown. They then hung 73 points on Youngstown State before they were on bye. They'll now have an opportunity to go on the road and play UNC, and based on how UNC's played the last couple of weeks, they should win this game, but we'll have to wait and see. Alabama transfer Eli Holstein has looked great, and Pitt is potentially a dark horse team to win the ACC right now. Speaking of dark horses, we have the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. Greg Schiano has proved over the last 2 weeks that they are a different Rutgers team, as they've now beaten 2 Power 5 opponents. They beat Howard 44-7 in Week 1 before taking care of Akron 49-17 in Week 2. 2 weeks ago, they got their biggest win in a long time, as they went on the road and beat a good Virginia Tech team 26-23. Rutgers proved that they were not just a team beating up on bad opponents. Then this past week, they beat Washington 21-18, further legitimizing themselves as a solid team this year. Rutgers is currently 4-0, and they have a really fun matchup coming up with Nebraska on the road here in a couple of days, and we'll see if Rutgers can stay unbeaten. Ranked right in front of Rutgers is the Indiana Hoosiers. Indiana has enjoyed a very strong start so far, as Curt Cignetti came over from JMU and has immediately made the Hoosiers a lot more competitive. They're having one of their best seasons in school history, as after beating FIU 31-7 in Week 1, they took care of Western Illinois 77-3 in Week 2. In Week 3, they went on the road and grabbed a huge victory over UCLA 42-13, and that does not typically happen for Indiana. Beating a Big Ten team that bad on the road, I've never seen that before. After that, they came back and beat Charlotte 52-14 at home before they would pack the house in Bloomington, Indiana, and beat Maryland 42-28 despite having 4 turnovers and Maryland not committing a single one. Curtis Rourke has been one of the best success stories at the quarterback position this year. Indiana is firing on all cylinders, and they really have an opportunity to make a dark horse run in the Big Ten, as they have one of the easier schedules, as they still have Northwestern, Washington, Michigan State, and Purdue on their schedule, all of which I don't think are all that great. The games against Michigan, Ohio State, and Nebraska could be thrilling, and Indiana at minimum is going to enjoy a successful season. Ranked right in front of Indiana is the Miami Hurricanes. That Week 1 win over Florida looks worse each and every week, and while it was great at first, Florida's just not that good of a team. They beat the Gators 41-17, and then beat Florida A&M 56-9. After that, they blanked Ball State 62-0 before going on the road to USF and taking care of Alex Golesh's Bulls 50-15. This past Friday, Miami got themselves in hot water as they allowed Virginia Tech to essentially score a Hail Mary. Yes, it should not have been called a Hail Mary on the field, but based on review rules, it should have stood. Miami ended up lucking out in this situation, as they are the cream of the crop in the ACC right now, and they cruise to 5-0, and they now get dates with both California and Louisville, who are tough teams and both on the road. After that, we can talk about the Oregon Ducks. Honestly, I have not been all that high on Dylan Gabriel in Oregon, but they have continued to get better each and every week. They currently have 3 pretty decent wins, as after struggling with Idaho 24-14 in Week 1, they beat Boise State 37-34 in Week 2. The Broncos are currently ranked and getting better each and every week, so that win is looking pretty good. After that, they played Oregon State on the road and won 49-14 in the Civil War game. Then this past week, they beat UCLA 34-14. Oregon is playing good football, and it seems they're figuring out their offense, and now they have a game against Michigan State before a potential huge matchup with Ohio State in one of the biggest Big Ten games of the 2024 season. Speaking of teams out west, we have the BYU Cougars ranked at number 5 right now. BYU has been the Cinderella shocker of this season, as after beating Southern Illinois 41-13 in Week 1, they went on the road and beat SMU 18-15 in Week 2, which is looking like a better win each and every week. After that, they went on the road and beat Wyoming 34-14, then they had a monumental win. They killed number 13 Kansas State 38-9, and now, this past weekend, they went on the road and beat Baylor 34-28. BYU now has 3 wins over Power 5 teams, 2 of which were on the road and 1 against a top 15 team, and they are playing like a really good football team. In 2 weeks, they play a tough Arizona team on the road, and we'll see if they can get to 6-0. Ranked right in front of BYU currently is the Texas Longhorns. The Longhorns beat Colorado State 52-0 in Week 1 before having one of the most impressive victories of the season on the road against number 10 Michigan 31-12. Quinn Ewers looked great, but then he got hurt against UTSA. Arch Manning would have to come in after that, when they would beat the Roadrunners 56-7 in that one. After that, Arch would start against UL Monroe, winning 51-3. Then this past weekend, they beat the worst team in the SEC, Mississippi State, 35-13. That win doesn't really do a whole lot for me, and they ultimately fell 2 spots from last week because of some teams passing them in terms of performance. And number 3, I have the Penn State Nittany Lions. In Week 1, they went on the road and beat West Virginia 34-12 despite a rain delay, and then survived against a pesky Bowling Green team in Week 2. That doesn't look great, but Bowling Green is at least a good MAC team this year. After that, they got the ship rightened as they killed Kent State 56-0. Then this past week, in a battle against one of the better Big Ten teams, number 19 Illinois, they won that game 21-7, and they now have 2 really good victories. Penn State will play UCLA this upcoming Saturday and then travel to USC, and we'll find out a lot more about the Nittany Lions in the coming weeks, but for now, Drew Allar does look legit, and Penn State is cruising towards a college football playoff spot. At number 2, they will move down a spot as the Tennessee Volunteers got passed. After beating Chattanooga 69-3 in Week 1, they came back and beat number 24 NC State on a neutral site 51-10. Yes, I know the NC State win isn't all that great, but it still went over a Power 5 team, and they dominated them. After that, they came back and put up 71 unanswered points on Kent State, and it looked like Tennessee's offense was unstoppable. They were not as crisp against number 15 Oklahoma, but they ultimately beat the Sooners 25-15 in one of the more impressive victories of this season. And Tennessee is currently 4-0, and they have a huge matchup with Arkansas this coming Saturday. And while I think the Volunteers are on upset watch right now, they've been a lot of fun to watch this season, and we'll see if they can get through both Arkansas and Florida before a potential showdown with number 1 Alabama. Speaking of number 1 Alabama, that's where I have the Crimson Tide. Last week I was a little bit critical of them. Now they have completely proved me wrong. After blanking Western Kentucky 63-0 in Week 1, they came back and destroyed USF 42-16 after struggling with them midway into the second half. In Week 3, they went on the road and beat Wisconsin 42-10, and that showed that they were headed in the right direction and were getting back to elite level status. But everyone was waiting. How did they do against number 2 Georgia? Well, the Bulldogs didn't fight at all in the first half, as the Crimson Tide went up 28-0 at one point. Bama was in complete control, and after being a little bit lax in the second half, Georgia would actually come back and take the lead. But that would only be for like 15 seconds or something, as Ryan Williams would eventually have a 75-yard touchdown, and Alabama would take the lead back, and Jalen Milroe currently is the frontrunner for the Heisman in my eyes. They got a huge victory over the number 2 Dogs, and Bama looks legit. For now, they're at number 1, and they should have a tune-up game against Vanderbilt this upcoming Saturday. But what do you guys think? Today we ranked all 19 undefeated teams that are left in college football, and let me know what you think I got right and wrong, and what other video I should do next. Also, don't forget to leave a like if you to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.